Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Legends Hour, shall I say, with 5 brilliant people, including Ashley, but no, I'm joking.
I was going to say, and our host.
And a horse, yeah. Well, we're all horse here. It's discussion. Please share this, everyone. Please subscribe. And I've got to say, the Mental Warriors private group now has hit the 1,000 members mark. It's hit the 1,000
Congratulations,
members.
brother. Congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a team effort. So yeah, I know Richard went mental today in inviting everyone to come and join. So big up, Richard. How is everyone anyway?
Fantastic. It's Friday here in the States.
Yeah, it's
always
Friday.
good. Always good. It's Friday.
That's Friday in the
Friday
UK too.
everywhere.
You guys are just 9 hours ahead. I always think of my friend in Australia where it's always tomorrow.
Yeah, it's Saturday there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nancy's getting a pill done. No, I'm joking.
Damn right. Yep.
Getting ready for her
For the
nuptials.
wedding, man. Getting ready for the wedding. This is wedding hair.
Not long.
Absolutely.
Is your better half getting his hair done too?
No, he has no hair.
Well, then he's got to get it polished up, Nancy.
That's right.
Yeah, he's got to give something. So anyway, I know Chris was messaging me earlier about this particular topic, about why we shouldn't judge a person just because of their behaviour. And obviously, I see there's an argument there. There is. But do we actually, the real question is, why are we judging in the first place? Is it our ego, or is it because we just want to voice our views and win that discussion? I don't know. Let me hear from you all.
Chris,
well, since you mentioned my name, I will go first. What I've been doing lately, and it's really been helping me and helping some other people out, is I've been taking a look at the definition of words. Like, we oftentimes use words without really considering their true meaning. Like, people will say, "Oh, da 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 da." I'm like, what does that mean to you? Because, of course, perspectives are everything, and our experiences base our perspectives and our beliefs and our actions. And so when I ask people, like, the definition, what they think a particular word means, I often find that it's in disparity with what I might think it is. And so we had that conversation first to kind of just settle the definition. So I looked up the definition of judgment just to make sure I understood it correctly. And it says the process of forming an opinion or evaluation by discerning and comparing. And so we were had that little chat on the message thingy, and I was thinking, okay, well, how else would you judge somebody but unless based on their actions? I mean, that's the evidential proof of what it is that they're thinking, therefore is what they're doing. But then I started digging deeper into that based on what you had responded with. Thank you. And I came up with some other things, but I sit there and I look at one of the biggest lessons I've learned in my life, just to kind of kick off my opinion about it, is my mother was very, very opinionated, was very judgmental, was very condescending, was very, what's that person doing? And at one time I looked at her and I said, "Mom, you're coming from a place of a lady who lives with 18 cats and 2 dogs inside of a 30-foot trailer, who smokes and who's lost every job, who's pushed away every husband, who's lost every person in her life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What gives you the right to judge what that person's doing? You have no idea what they've been through." And so, by which of a very sincere intention of mine was not to turn out like my mother, and I didn't, I started understanding one of the big rules that I learned from Stephen Covey, which is seek first to understand, then to be understood, because we never know what particular action somebody's taking in that moment of time, that little picture of time. We don't know what happened before it, what's going to happen before it, after it. We don't know what their method to their madness is. So for me, if I see something I don't understand, I ask myself, okay, why am I judging the situation? What is it about myself I might be judging? But also, if it's a situation that I can partake in, I'll ask that person to help me understand what it is that they're doing, so that perhaps I can get a bigger picture of it.
Absolutely. And I see we've already got a comment as well from one of our new subscribers. Thank you for subscribing. What do you mean by behavior if you have not got a person who behaves like a drug addict, for example, then they are a drug addict? Nance, do you want to take this one?
The action is using drugs. The behavior that leads to the choice for that action is different. What thought is leading to the action? Doing drugs is simply an indicator of a deep-rooted problem. So the behavior is the deep-rooted problem that they have. It's the emotion. Behavior is an emotion. It's a way of being. That's where the behavior comes from. Like what Chris was talking about. When you look at the language of something, I could be using cocaine. What is the behavior that led me to choose to use cocaine? What's the trauma? What's the problem? What's right? Like it's challenges and choices, it's obstacles and opportunities. So there's an obstacle in someone's life and the opportunity is drugs.
Well
When you
said.
when you take the judgment and the shame out, you're able to look at the person, the action, and the way of being. It's not easy. I didn't say any of this was easy. It's possible, right?
Yeah, because if it's easy, then there's something fucking going wrong.
I think we auto, with human beings, we automatically make instant perceptions of people and impressions of people, and we're inbuilt to do that. But I think obviously it's not always right first impression. I think that's we judge people by their behaviour. Well, that's how we judge people. But and if people's behaviour is unacceptable, then what's acceptable. Obviously, so there is some sort of behaviour that isn't acceptable, and that's why in society have boundaries or what. But I guess it's the danger is where we can jump to conclusions when we see a certain behaviour. I think that can be a risk if people exhibit behaviour. We automatically assume that because they're behaving a certain way, that means that was reflecting their who they are as a person or what they're doing or their lifestyle. Jumping to conclusions, and I think making the wrong impression that can be a very dangerous thing. I think definitely we have to be wary of doing that.
Yeah, projecting. What you're saying is projecting. Sometimes we project onto people what we think of what they're doing from that case of superiority or validation for our own actions that we may not be very proud of.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, because obviously there's a difference between opinionating and self-defending our trauma, should I say? Our trauma coming out. Because I remember a few years back where I had a bit of a disagreement with my kids' ed teacher over something she was doing. And she could see my frustration with the situation. And she's like, "You've got trauma." I'm like, "Yes, I do." So it just shows it. We could be just defending our trauma. I don't know.
We are conclusion making machines. That's how we are patterned. We're taught that in school. We're taught to draw conclusions. So when we're taught to draw conclusions, we often do not have the compassion. And if instead of drawing conclusions, we open up communication, so many things can change.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you're saying if a person used drugs because they have been in care, for example, you're saying that you can't judge the person for using drugs because you don't know why they're using drugs in the first place.
You don't know why they're using drugs. Only they know why they're using drugs.
Yes.
Only the person who is using the drugs knows why they're using the drugs. They can try to communicate to you why they're using the drugs. Only they know. Anybody else is drawing conclusions, speculating, looking at evidence. Only the user knows, and only the user is the person who can stop using too.
Absolutely.
And why might you be an expert, Nancy? Why don't you share a little bit about that so people can understand that who are watching and may not know you?
Yeah.
As a recovered, I recovered from the battered woman syndrome. I lived with drug addicts. I lived with a drug addict, but he was addicted to many styles of drugs, many styles to alcohol, gambling. So I've had lived experience, and in understanding how to overcome my own codependency, because codependency is one heck of a strong addiction, I had to sit down with myself and get to know myself and have conversations with myself. The pen, the paper, decades of journaling through it. And one of my greatest resources was Byron Katie. And Byron Katie teaches inquiry. So in that time, thanks, Chris. Is it true? Ask yourself that question. Is it true? Are you sure it's true? How does that thought make you feel? And turn that thought around. Inquiry is like, whoa, rock star amazing. It's a process. It's a process. It's called the work. It's called the work.
Yeah. Yes. What do you think, Richard?
Well, I'm a big fan of my brother, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. And something that he said is that your opinion of me is none of my business. I'm 56 years old, and I'm at a point in my life. You may like me, you may not like me. That's none of my business. And for me, in order to look at another person and be condescending, I got to make sure that my side of the street is clean before the other person. I start talking about the other person cleaning up their side of the street. And unfortunately, almost everybody, I'm not saying everybody, I don't want to get everybody flipped out, but everybody is addicted to something. And it might be your cell phone, which you look at 400 times a day. It might be sex. It might be relationships. It might be something else. So just make sure before you start talking shit about somebody else, make sure that your side of the street is clean.
Exactly. Yeah. Ashley?
I don't know that there's really much more to say. Coming from a person who can be, and sometimes is, very judgmental of people based on their actions and their behavior, I think the gut reaction to continue that judgment is based off of the reaction versus the responding, the taking the step back and paying attention to what it is that they're doing. Now, I'm also a believer that people show you who they truly are sometimes as well. In those moments where we begin to judge the behavior, if you will. So if you're dealing with a narcissist, for example, they don't think that they're doing anything wrong, and they begin to gaslight you and make you think that you're the issue and it's all on you, where then sometimes that judgmental side can come out from me. I'm speaking from me, because then I start to question, and not just question myself, but then start putting judgments on the other person. Like, one, I like to say that I don't give a shit what they think, but at the end of the day, it does spark something. It brings out the trauma, like you said. It ignites that, oh shit, maybe it is me. And then again, you start to play this mental ping pong in your head. And almost to a point where you begin to become very cautious of people, of trusting them, of, okay, you've shown me your true colors once. If I give you a little trust, are you going to do it again? And then we continue that spiral of that judgment based on their behavior because we've seen it. So we're kind of standoffish and not wanting to put that trust, if you will, or lay that judgment down of, okay, maybe they had a bad day. Like we block it off. We choose not to seek further, if you will. But yes, like you said, Richard, it's taking the plank out of your own eye before you can remove the speck in your brother's eye type of a situation. And I'll be the first to admit I struggle with judgment. Hello, hi.
Yeah, Richard just put a really good comment here. Don't allow my confidence offend your insecurities.
Well, and while I've got this bag on my head, Christopher, if you would speak to tolerations.
Go on.
Sure. I mean, I think, Nancy's a part of my group coaching program, and we talk about that. That's one of the big things that I do with people is I find that we tend to tolerate a lot of stuff from ourselves. We tend to tolerate a lot of stuff from other people, and we tend to tolerate a lot of stuff from inanimate objects. And we kind of build and build and build, and that helps form our beliefs and our opinions and and that informs our actions, and our actions support our reactions. And, it's really a matter of becoming aware. When I think about this conversation, and I was giving it some deep thought, I thought, it really is about that self-awareness of where it is that I'm truly coming from. Where am I coming from? And I found that I try to distill things down into very simple forms from my life of being the trauma that I experienced when I was a kid, being homeless and the 7th grade dropout and living on the streets and trying to kill myself and all these different things that I experienced. I had to go through a lot of healing and a lot of growth and a lot of perspective shifting in order for me to become the successful person that I am. And part of that was sitting there looking, okay, am I looking through a lens of love or am I looking through a lens of fear? And that's when I really have distilled down that if my perspective is looking through a lens of fear, then what is it about that person's actions or their behaviors or their thoughts or whatever it might be that I potentially could be judging? What is it about that that's causing me to reflect internally with an emotion inside? You said you were talking about emotions, right? It's very important. Our sense of anger, our sense of resentment, our sense of jealousy, right? Coming from that place of ego, then that we tend to like the definition said, I love that the part that said it's comparing. So when we look at the things we're tolerating, we have to examine what we're tolerating from ourselves. And are we looking at life from that comparison standpoint? Oh, am I justified in feeling superior because I'm better than that person? And that goes back to a lot of what's ingrained in us as kids, right? You think about what happens between the ages of 0 and 5 and all those different behaviors that happens with our parents and our siblings and our loved ones and our teachers and all those different things that are put into our brain of what to think about ourselves and our identity in the world. We could talk about identity for 10 hours. For me, it goes back to that am I tolerating myself to be an asshole or am I tolerating myself to be a person of love and compassion? And because I grew up with a person who was an asshole, my mother, it took a long time for me to sit there and say, in my head, stop, Chris, you're judging that person. You're putting that person down based on what you're seeing right in this moment. And that's why I think it's important for us. And one of the game changers, again, for me was to seek first to understand, to not longer tolerate myself just to make that immediate judgment. Because what I found in my life, I've always looked different. I used to have long hair. I've always looked like a rock and roller, a tough guy, a Harley Davidson rider. I've always had people look at me like, oh my God, that guy looks mean. I used to have resting dick face when I didn't have my teeth fixed. I used to have fangs and I never smiled. So I looked like a badass and people would judge me all the time. And I'm like, hey, you don't even know me. I have a master's degree. And people are like, you have a master's degree? And I'm like, yes, as a matter of fact, I do. Just because I look this certain way, don't judge a book by its cover. That used to be one of my favorite sayings. And so to Nancy's point, when we sit there and we stop and we get self-aware and we realize that we're tolerating a particular behavior from ourselves and we become self-aware to change it, for me to say stop and go, hey, Adam, I see this particular behavior, this action with you in the workplace. I don't understand it. Can you help me explain and understand where that might have come from and what your true intention is with what it is that you're doing? Because I have found more often than not, when I do that and I examine what somebody's doing or somebody's thinking or what their method of operation is in that particular moment, I find there's a much bigger picture based on what that person themselves have experienced in their life, right? You think about all the different experiences. And so when you look back at it, oftentimes I find, wow, I really didn't consider it from that perspective. I was seeing it just from my viewpoint, but now you've expanded my awareness and it's helped me become an excellent coach and it's helped me become a much more compassionate person. So when I see somebody, I often wonder what happened to get that person into that situation. And if I have time, I'll ask that person, hey, help me understand how you became homeless. Hey, help me understand, how you battled this or whatever it might be. And I find there's a lot more to life. So I think that's that ownership that we have to take within ourselves to stop and be that self-aware and realize that sometimes we're tolerating the fact that, we cast stones from glass houses and things of that nature. So yeah, I could go on all about this, but my question back to you, Adam, is what precipitated this unique question and opportunity? Was this something that happened with you that kind of made this jump out in awareness?
I think just because of this particular topic, it really gets you to think. I think we're all guilty of judging someone just because we felt like it. Oh, yeah. I think we're all guilty of that. But I think it's just because when you really think, about judging, you have to question how much do we actually know that person.
Mm-hmm.
Seriously, whether it's a friend, whether it's a work colleague, whether it's our freaking parents, how much do we actually know them before we judge them? So it's all about it goes back to resentment, doesn't it? It goes back to resentment and
jealousy.
Jealousy. I was just going to say the jealousy too, Chris, because, it must be nice, right?
Yeah.
But when we listen to our words have power. Words have power. And, if Ashley was going on an adventure and I looked at the adventure and said, oh, must be nice to go away for a week to Shangri-La. She's leaving her kids behind. Oh, she's that kind of mother, right? Like it shows up in so many ways. And we got to tune into ourselves, tune into our self-talk. I mean, I know I do it myself too, right? Oh, must be nice to have that Porsche. Well, my brother's got 2 Porsches. It is nice. And he worked hard to get them, right? So you got to check in with the things between your ears, between your eyes, and really see where it's coming from. Yeah, self-awareness.
I've definitely become more compassionate in certain situations. It's easier, I think, to judge the behaviors of family sometimes than it is to judge the behaviors of a stranger. In my opinion, sometimes, but just because you're typically closer, if you will, with family. Typically, that's not always the case. But, and that's where that comparison, like you said, Nancy, comes in. That must be nice. Well, then in the back of your head, you're comparing yourself to their lifestyle. Especially for us after becoming business owners. We've been in business for 5 years now, and it seems small, but at the end of the day, when my husband and I go back and we look at, say, our origin of where we originally came from, and then what people see from the outside looking in, they judge it thinking, oh, well, you got that new truck, you got that new trailer, you've got this, you've got that. But at the end of the day, what they don't see is they see the success at the top, but they don't see all the shit below. And we were talking about that a couple weeks ago. They don't see all that shit, the dedication, the blood, sweat, and tears, the hours, the away from the family, and all of the things. But all they're looking at is, oh, well, you guys took a trip, you went here, and oh, you got that new truck and you've got that trailer. Yeah, what you don't see is there's a loan on that damn truck, so he can take that said trailer to a job site to continue rolling in income. Like it's ask the questions, like you said, Chris. Ask the questions, find out the details, help me understand, and that's why I've become probably more open with even friends and some people when they ask about wanting to start their own business. Okay, well, don't look at here, because you have to remember how much time and dedication and all the things that it took to get to this point. Are you willing to put that work in? So, like what's been said, we have to look internally and we have to evaluate where it is that maybe we need to correct ourselves.
Okay. I've got a question. When was the last time we judged ourselves and said, hang on a minute, you are not that person?
Today.
All the time.
Every day.
Yeah.
Self-judgment, self-sabotage. I mean, look at the self-judgment. How often do you look in the mirror or look at your life? Oh, I didn't get all these things done. I'm not good enough. That's a big one.
Well, like for me today, for instance, I had 5 people reach out to me asking questions about podcasting, and they're like, "You're the podcast guru. You're the podcast this and that." And I'm like, "I'm not feeling that today. I just feel like a regular dude. I feel that I haven't earned those titles." But then somebody says, "You are that dude. We know you're that dude, but you don't think you're that dude." So a lot of time we deal with imposter syndrome because of what somebody might have said to you as a child. It's still in the brain. So sometimes we have to get over our hangups from our childhood hangups too.
Yeah.
I guess it little links to it. We're competing, comparing ourselves to others. I think, we often criticize ourselves when we think we're not doing as well as we should, but it's often comparing ourselves to others. If we look at other people, we think, why aren't I successful at that person, or why isn't, then it's easy to judge ourselves as where we think we should be. And, it's always easy, like Ash was saying, looking at people making a judgment, thinking that they're more successful, they've got it all, without knowing actually it's not as simple as that. It's easy to sort of get the wrong impression. But I think, definitely, I think that's one of the worst things, isn't it? Judging by comparing ourselves to others. Well,
obviously, when I first got with Kerry, talking almost 16 years ago now.
She's watching. Do you want to be careful?
No, you know what? No, she's actually going to agree with this, and I know she is. But when I first got with her, and we were seen in the street by complete people that know her but not me, I had long hair, facial hair, everything, leather jacket, you name it. I was a proper rocker, shall I say? And there's like, Kerry, why are you with that 40-year-old man? And she's like, you're not. I'm not. I'm with a 17-year-old, and that was at the time. So it just shows to just judge.
But I think we're brought up being taught conformity is good. The more we, it's all from the school. Conform, fit in. Conforming is good. I mean, even in Britain, it's generally for, there's an educational path, get a job, get a career, there's a way to do things, there's a way to be successful, there's a way to be, it's generally one path. And I think it's all about conforming. And I think, obviously there's a million ways to reach, to do what you want to do, to be happy, to be successful, but I think it's still, certainly in England, I think, it's all about conforming, and I think that's the trouble. We're still thought to fit in certain boxes and conform and not be different, and I think that's where we automatically then become judging others who don't conform into what we think people should do and be and look like.
Oh, it's here like that in the United States too. For me, what plays in the back of my head with the school system is, well, no, not even so much that, but when I was in 4th grade, I can remember I was homesick, and a couple weeks probably later, my cousin tells me, "Oh yeah, we had a meeting about you at school in the classroom." 4th grade. And the teacher said, "Just be nice to Ashley because she's different." Ooh. What?
Wow.
Why, as a 4th grade teacher, do you think that that's okay to have a meeting about another student with the class for people to pretend to be nice to me? So I was always very outspoken, if you will. I was the girl that always had talks too much on her report card. Fancy that. But I was always outside the box, if you will, and not really one that wanted to conform to what everybody else was doing. So when my husband and I got engaged, the very first thing my dad said was, "You won't last 5 years. We are going on year number 20 in a few weeks." So it's that drive to almost tell people, "Screw you, I'll show you what I'm made of."
Yeah.
So again, yes, it's those judgments. And society is also one of those things that plays that role. That in like social media and all the things, you see everybody's highlight reel, but you don't see the mess behind the scenes.
True.
You just see what they want you to see. And then based on that, like what was already said, we make those judgments. So it's the help of society too that teaches kids to make those judgments. And kids nowadays, I mean, they were mean back then, but they've gotten a lot meaner. And it starts in the home too. So if our kids are seeing us make judgments, then they're going to begin to make judgments as well. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, and I need to physically hear this for myself as a reminder of, hey, Ashley, just zip your lips. Like, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all, right? That phrase that we heard so many times growing up. But again, it's really looking at the situation. And like you said, Chris, what are we tolerating? Because we're going to continue to get what we tolerate as well. So then it goes to boundaries. What boundaries do you have in place with people? So, I mean, this is a multifaceted conversation, I guess, that could lead from one area to another to another. So, yeah.
It's interesting you say about social media, because I think, you know, we on social media, we make instant, you know, we scroll, you know, like hundreds of posts, and we make quick decisions where we, you know, scroll past something. And I was thinking I started using a dating app to, you know, online dating, and it's, you know, make a decision in a second where you're going to swipe left or scroll right. You've got hundreds of profiles of, you know, people, you know, left or right. And we're making a decision on someone which could potentially be a life partner on a second scroll, you know, swipe left or right. And I think it reflects like this whole thing of like maybe a wider thing of we're going into building up a way through social media thinking to make instant decisions whether we like a post, whether we like a person, by an instant impression of the image or the headline. And I think it's, you know, certainly I can see how the online dating, you know, swipe left, swipe right. I sometimes think, oh, you know.
I'd like to go back to something that Ashley's.
You muted
yourself.
You're good. You're good.
When I was in 4th grade, I had a teacher, Mr. Ferreira, who told me I was a good for nothing, I was stupid, and I was lazy. And because I had severe ADHD and dyslexia. And my mother agreed with him. And now every time I write out an autographed copy of my #1 best-selling book, I say, fuck you, Mr. Ferreira. So if you're watching, Mr. Ferreira, fuck you. But guys, I just want to say, if you're a parent, make sure you're watching what you're saying into your kids, because you're either breathing life into your kids or you're breathing death into your children. So make sure whatever you say to your children, make sure you think it out before you say it, because just one sentence might affect that child for the rest of their life.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just found a quote about don't judge book by its cover. So here's a little bit of history for you all. There you go. In 1867, Pica Democrat used the phrase, see a man by his cloth.
It's interesting because, the saying, obviously, don't judge a book by a cover, but that's exactly how we judge books. When we look at a book, It's by the cover, and it's the same with, you know, we that's what we do, isn't it? We judge people.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, and there's an opportunity for curiosity. Curiosity is just such an amazing superpower. You can be curious about other people. You can be curious about yourself. You know, like Chris said, seek first to understand. The opportunity for conversation is absolutely amazing. There's so much that you can learn about another person. And in learning about another person, you learn about yourself. When you learn about yourself, you learn about another person. Life's an adventure. I mean, every single day that you live creates your tomorrow. So if you get more curious about what you're creating in your life today, more intentional about what you're creating in life today, then your tomorrow is a byproduct of your today. We look really, really far back into our lives, and it's good. It's important to look back in your childhood, to look back in your relationships when you are activated. So if you have an experience and you have an experience in your life, something that's, puts you in the tips your rocker off point, and you're like, rocker goes back, you're like, this is bullshit, or whatever it is, whatever your response is when you're activated. What thought came up? Be curious about it. Be curious. There's so much that you can learn about yourself and improve about yourself every single day.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah, we're always learning.
The work to heal.
Yeah, we're always learning. Always learning.
Well, and you have to understand that if it took 20 years to put you in the place that you're at, it's not going to take 20 minutes to fix it. If you got 20 years of trauma, a 20-minute session with somebody isn't going to fix it, right? Like instant gratification, it's just not going to happen.
But come on, Nance, isn't it Amazon 2-day shipping?
Right? And that's what we expect, right? We read a book. Do we apply the strategies in the book? Right? It's called the work, right? You got to put it in. You got to put it in. Life's a game. What kind of player are you going to be?
Yeah. And there's something I want to speak to what a couple of you said, talking about family and things of that nature. I look at in terms of who is it the person that I'm becoming, not the person who I was. And every single day we can sit there and look at and say, okay, I'm not going to see myself through the lens of what it is that I was, because now my perspectives and my beliefs and my opinions and my actions and my thoughts and my dreams have changed. For me, I had a big eye-opening experience when I was writing this book, my memoir that's going to be out later this year, called It's Just You and Me, Kid. It's the story of my mother and myself and our journey of being homeless and all these ups and downs in my life. And it wasn't until I was getting near the end of the book and I asked myself, do I still have anger and resentment towards her for the way she physically abused me, mentally abused me, and all these things in that nature? And I thought, yeah, I do to a certain extent, but I also understand that all of those experiences happen for me and not to me, for me to go through those adverse experiences to become the person that I chose to be today. But I thought, what could I possibly do in order to heal that? Because my mother used to say she did the best she could with what she had. And I would often call bullshit. I'm like, no, you didn't, Mom. You're supposed to feed your kid before you feed your cat. You're supposed to feed your kid before you buy cigarettes. You're supposed to put your kid in school even when you're homeless. You're not supposed to make them do all these things. But again, looking at that lens of perspective of gratitude for having had those experiences, I thought, wait a minute. Why did my mom always tell me that she was 4 years old? My mom would always say she was 4 years old. My mom was incredibly brilliant, book smart. She studied to be a doctor without being a doctor. I mean, incredibly book smart, people smart. She was stupid as the day is long. But she would say, I'm 4 years old. And I'm like, why the fuck do you keep saying you're 4 years old? One time I got mad at her. I said, you're a 50-year-old woman. This was a long time ago because now I'm 55. And I said, you're a 50-year-old woman. I said, would you start fucking acting like it? You're a smart person. Why do you keep saying you're 4 years old? And she would never tell me. And then she would always have stuffed animals, and she would have cats and animals. And then after she passed and I was writing this book, I thought, what happened to her at 4? Why does she keep saying that? We get stuck psychologically in an age. Sometimes we don't mature past that. We can appear to be an adult, but we could still be psychologically that little boy or that little girl. And I found more often than not, if I look at somebody as being that little boy or that little girl, I understand them a lot quicker, and I'm able to ask them questions to understand them a lot easier. And I thought, okay, her mom and dad got divorced when she was 4 years old, and she went to go live with her psychotic mother. My grandmother literally had like 6 different diagnosable psychiatric disorders, including schizophrenia. My mother gave me a list one time when I was going to see a therapist. She goes, you should tell your therapist that this is what runs in our family. And I'm like, it's bullshit. It doesn't run in our family. But I thought about it. I'm like, okay, if I was like my mother back in 1942, or I'd be 1946 at that point, divorced of parents in their early 20s during that particular time in the political era, and that time of how women were treated, and how she had to go live with her schizophrenic mother, and how her mother made her just do nothing but studies, and she didn't have a social life, and she didn't know how to be around people, and she graduated high school at 15, and she went to UC Santa Barbara at 16, and she did all these things. Might I have been like her? That was the key nugget. Might I have been like her if I went through her experiences with her situation, her physiology? And I thought, begrudgingly, as much as I didn't want to admit it, I'm like, yeah, I would have turned out like her. So everything did happen for that particular reason. And fortunately, I had the wherewithal enough to be surrounded by people who said, hey, Chris, don't turn out like that. So I better understood my mother. I had empathy for her. And that's something that I looked at when I was reading about the term judgment. Is it's also the ability to have empathy and understanding for somebody in that particular situation, because we don't know what people have been through. And so in that exercise of doing that, I've helped tons and tons of people go through that exercise. And they're just like, wow, if I sit there and I think about my dad going through what he did, we oftentimes hear the phrase hurt people hurt people. And so if we can sit there and develop that understanding, like to step back, and I think, Ashley, you said it, that whole thing about responding versus reacting, it's huge with me. If we could just take a pause and try to ignore that fight, flight, or freeze, tendency that happens, innately in our physiology, and go, hey, here's a moment where I can ask a question instead of inserting my opinion. Then we can start to grow, and then we can start to develop that habit and that ritual of saying, hey, listen, maybe I don't have all the answers. And maybe if I had been that person in that situation, I might have turned out like them. So let's see what we could do to help them as opposed to put them down. So it helped me immensely. It's helped tons of my clients. And I just wanted to share that. Yeah. What's helped you guys?
Putting a drink down. That's helped me. Putting a drink down.
Because what was it doing for you, or what was it doing to you, or what? Well,
obviously, when I had the influences in my life, drink, that was my partner for over 10 years. Not Kerry, the alcohol, and I admit that. I admit that it was. I abandoned her. I abandoned our eldest just to go and get pissed, and the character I became was an aggressive type. But I thought that was good behavior. I thought that was normal. Clearly not. Clearly not. I am admitting it. I was an abusive wanker while I was drinking. I was.
Wanker.
Oh, shut up. But I was. But now I've put the drink down. I've changed. And I'm going to continue to keep healing.
Bravo.
Mm-hmm.
What has helped you guys?
Chris? What about you, Chris? What's changed?
What's changed? Basically what I've said before. It's that awareness and that desire to continue to become the person that I know I'm meant to be. I have a loosely termed sister, and I stopped seeing my sister when I was 9 years old. She's 7 years older than me since she was 16. She left when she was 16. She went to her biological dad's, who was by all means normal. And I didn't see my sister until my mid 30s. And crazy enough, when the internet started coming out, she found me and we reunited. Long story short, I thought that she was going to be the super successful, happy person because she grew up with her dad who was normal and had money, and she had all the things. She wasn't homeless and had to do all the things that I had to do. And I met my sister, and she was exactly, no word of a lie, exactly like my mom. She had not been around my mom since she was 16 years old. Now she was in her 40s, I believe. I think she was 42 at the time. And she turned out exactly like my mom. Crazy cat lady, blamed everybody for all of her problems, got fired from every job. She was totally alone. She had books upon books all around her house. And one day she said, baby brother, she goes, how did you not turn out like mom? And I immediately said, without hesitation, I fucking chose not to. I chose not to. I said, I saw what things mom did and how she treated people and how she treated herself and how she blamed everybody else for her situations. I said, I've taken responsibility for my situations. I had to make one of the toughest decisions I ever had to make at 17 years old, where I had to look at a situation and go, I'm going to get out of here dead. I'm going to get out of here in a police car, or I'm going to have to take responsibility for my own actions. And I made the hardest decision in my life at that point. And I left the situation with my mom, and I went out and I got 3 jobs, and I lived in an apartment with 5 guys, and I ate ketchup sandwiches. And then one guy one day once said to me, he said, Chris, you're only limited by the parameters of your own mind. Have you ever thought about going back to school? And I thought the guy was crazy. And I said, no, I think I'm going to work 6 jobs for the rest of my life and barely make it, and hopefully try not to be homeless. I think that's my goal. And he invited me to shift my perspective. I went back, got my GED in 6 months, 3 months. I can't remember what it was. And then I spent 12 years in college, and I got my master's degree the same year I bought my first house. And because I took that ownership, because I made that sacrifice to read books, I spent 2 years reading nothing but leadership books about famous leaders and famous presidents and what it is that they did in order to overcome their weaknesses and their tolerations, if you will. And because I have been so intentional about that growth. I have hundreds of books all around me. I'm constantly watching YouTube videos or listening to podcasts. I'm constantly growing and thirsty and excited. Okay, what kind of person am I going to be at 60? Well, how am I going to be at 70? Am I going to be a fucking philosopher by then? Oh my God, now I'm a parent. Now I'm experiencing all those things and having to sit back and go, wait, Chris. Jackson's a different type of individual. He's a different human being. You can't impose your beliefs and your ideologies. He's got his own little roadmap. So every situation in our life is happening to have us have those opportunities to pause and go, hey, how can I grow from this experience? I'm big on questions. So I'm like, what can I learn from what it is that's going on right now? I may not like it. I may not agree with it. There's presidential stuff and all those sorts of things around in this world that I'm going, huh? But I ask myself, what am I supposed to learn and grow from that? And I think that's one of the keys to my happiness and my success. So there's your answer. Well, long-winded as usual.
Well, I want to pick up on that because you've actually got me thinking, which is very dangerous sometimes.
I always get you thinking, brother. We've had some deep talks.
We have. Now, obviously, and I hope Kerry's still in this chat anyway, which I hope she is anyway. But when it came to Kerry and her upbringing, like she had a toxic upbringing, just like me. And when it came to cats, she wanted multiple cats, but she wasn't allowed. She wanted purple in the bedroom, but she wasn't allowed. And now in our own house, we've got multiple cats. We've got purple in the bedroom. And pictures and all that, they're not exactly straight. And I think she does that just to piss people off. Not in a judging way, just to basically do that. Would you say that's her new character, or would you say that's her trauma coming out?
That's hard to say without more context of the situation. I mean, my observational thinking is there's still a bit of rebellion that's going on, and there's some feeling. That's so I think if we're trying to prove or show or demonstrate or act out or act as if or pay back or anything like that, I think there's some layers to dig through and understand why that is. There are certainly tendencies and motivations and things for us to do and to take personal in our life and to want to show or demonstrate or whatever it is, or whatever verb you want to put onto it. But I think there's some opportunity for healing in there. And
I agree.
Yeah, it's I've done some of those things in my past that I'm not proud of, but I'm also proud that I've gone to seek mental help and I've gone to therapy and I've had coaches and mentors and constantly striving to uncover what's next. I went to a therapist one time for 5 sessions and I got to the 5th session. I'm like, all right, I'm going to fire this person. I went through a lot of different therapists, but then she asked me one question. She asked me one question that I still remember to this day and I will never forget. She said, Chris, when did you stop being a kid? And that unraveled a whole bunch of stuff for me to really consider, because I said, I think 7 or 8. And then she goes, well, how does that make you feel? And so she had me do some exercises to reconnect with my inner child. I did the inner child work. I found out that I felt guilt and shame for playing when I didn't earn the right or deserve the right to go out and do that, because it was proven upon me by my mother that you work and you work and you work and you work and you work. We never went on vacations. I never knew what that was. And so I felt shame and guilt. Like if I sat there and said, okay, it's 2:00 in the afternoon, I'm gonna play my PlayStation. It's like, no, Chris, you haven't earned or deserved it. But she invited me to get back in touch with that little kid. And as part of that process, I found empathy and understanding for that little boy. And part of what I did is I picked up a picture of myself when I was, 6, 7, 8 years old. I can't remember what it was. And I had a conversation with the picture. I literally picked up the picture. I don't know the picture, but I picked up the picture and I started talking to myself. And I started saying, Chris, you're going to go through a buddy or whatever. I said, you're going to go through a lot of shit in your life. You're going to dig through dumpsters. You're going to have a gun put to your head. You're going to be carjacked. You're going to have all these different things. You're going to do drugs. You're going to but you're ultimately going to figure it out. You're ultimately going to realize a blessed life and a great career and an opportunity to impact people all over the world. But you're going to have to want to do the work. You're going to have to not run away from your problems. You're not going to have to blame everybody else. You're going to have to accept responsibility for the actions and the things that you do in those moments. But ultimately, you're going to grow and you're going to learn from that. And I invite people to do that, to pick up a picture of yourself and have that conversation and take that little boy or that little girl that's still inside of us all and have that journey with yourself and realize, okay, who do I want to be? And for me, Adam, it's all about building the legacy of if I die tomorrow, who would show up and what would they say? And so from that point on, from 2008, when I realized and I had that question to myself when I was sitting at a funeral, every single day I've set the intention that I'm going to be a person that fights for what's right and what's fair, and risks for what's that matters, and leaves the earth a better place for who I am and what I do. So when I wake up in the morning, I set that intention to be that person. So that if this is the last conversation I ever have and my son and my wife watch it, they're like, was Chris, was he on point with what he wanted to be remembered for? Yes. And so I think that's something that we can all aspire in our brains to do, because when we do it, there's a sense of calm and there's a sense of peace that really comes over us to understand that it is all happening on purpose. And it may not be happening to our expectations and our wants, but ultimately things do happen and they work out in the best way possible.
And that's what I'm doing, because I know Kerry's put another couple of comments, which is brilliant, but that's what I'm doing because I was brought up in an argumentative, toxic environment. But then when things get heated here, whether it's our eldest, whether it's our daughter who's going through the change now, or whether it's even Kerry, if they want an argument, I'm like, I'm not entertaining this. I'm not interested. And I remain calm. Does it piss them off that I'm saying that? Yeah. But the thing is, though, I've grown to realise me not entertaining that and me not rising to that, and they've got an issue with that. That's not my issue. That's not my problem. That's their problem. Mm-hmm. This is something for them to deal with.
I'm proud of you, dude. We've had many conversations.
Exactly.
What do the rest of you guys think? What's helped you in your life to be where you're at today, and what's the prognosis for your continued growth?
For me, it's these yellow sheets of paper. This is my first book that I wrote on yellow sheets of paper. And when I was writing my first book, I realized I'm the villain in so many other people's lives. I've hurt so many other people. So now when I start thinking about it, I start thinking, okay, what are the other person? What are they going through? How have they gone through it? And make sure that I don't continue being a villain in somebody else's picture, because each one of us, not saying everyone, but almost everybody is a villain in somebody else's movie. So make sure that you look at it that way.
That's a good point.
Yeah, exactly.
I think for me, it's always been like acceptance of, when I was young, I used to talk about like judging. I would judge myself and I would blame myself for things that are happening to me and things happening to other people. And I was the worst critic. And I think, constantly destroying my own confidence with negative inner voice. And I got to a point where I think, I realized, I had to accept what had happened, who I was. And, the only way to move forward and progress was to have acceptance. It's been, things I couldn't change in the past and things I can change will only change if I embrace the, obviously the positive aspects and let the other stuff go. But it was that acceptance, of realizing I had to, and it's still an ongoing battle at times. But I think accepting that you can't change everything in life, can't control everything in life. Sometimes things happen out of your control, and to me, that realization is the biggest thing to me, and I still have to work it ongoing. But
it's not a battle; it's an opportunity.
That's it.
Yeah. When we change the language that we use, I've found that powerful things happen. But it's not a battle; it's an opportunity.
No words. Yeah, it's true. How you frame it.
Yeah, absolutely. Ashley, you've got many battles.
Yeah.
Do share.
Yeah, there's some. Ruminating this, and Chris, as you were talking before, there was literally tears welling up in my eyes. I think just realizing that all of us have healing work to do in some capacity. And 2024, I definitely began that journey. I like to say that I stopped a lot of the cycles that my one half of my family does. I stopped that when my husband and I started having kids. And we knew that we wanted to raise our children differently. But then I'm thinking in my head, but really, Ashley, how differently are you raising them when you still parent them like your dad parented you, where it was yelling? And I mean, and it's not all the time, and it's definitely gotten better, but it's a lot of times it's my way or the highway. Probably because I am with them 24/7. And my husband works outside of the house in our business. And I also think, being that when we were foster parents, I always ruminate in my head, when kids are at their worst, it means they're comfortable enough around you to be at their worst. And they're always going to target the one that they're with the most. And that's what we always had to remember as foster parents. It has nothing to do with us personally. It's just whatever they're going through. So I definitely know that there's things that I need to change in my own parenting style. And that is a lifelong thing to reverse. When you're so ingrained in how you were raised and how you were parented. I like to say I'm very old school, but also in today's world, if you will, of exposing my children to what's out there in the world, and being real with them. And I think that was always the biggest thing when I was growing up that drove my dad crazy, because my mom and dad were divorced, that my mom always did. Even at 12, she had conversations with me and as a teenager and whatever about where finances always stood. And I feel like sometimes parents want to shelter their kids from knowing where finances stand and all of the things. But if she didn't have those conversations with me when I was that age, I wouldn't be in the financial positions I am today.
Yeah.
I wouldn't manage my money. Granted, again, like some people, it's not perfect, but I wouldn't manage my finances the way that I do today. Very specific in how I do things. So I thank my mom for doing that, because otherwise the other part was, let's keep it a secret. You get a job, you work hard, you know, go to college, and then you get married and have kids and all of the things. Like that was the piece that was always ingrained, but we didn't talk finances on my dad's side. It was nobody's business. It was quiet. But so those are things that helped me along the way, and just realizing that there are moments that trigger me and there are moments that set me off. And then I remember, Ashley, that was when you were a teenager. That's how your teenage self responds. So it's definitely, it's lifelong work. It's not anything that's ever going to end just because, oh, yep, I'm healed. And then all of a sudden this huge explosion happens and you don't even think to recognize or understand where it came from. And I even think about that even with my husband, who has an alcoholic mother that we've separated ourselves from because of the choices that she makes. And we've just set that boundary. And when you were talking, Chris, about talking to your inner child, I think that's what was sparking some things in my brain of, when did my husband have to stop being a kid? And this isn't necessarily questions I've asked him, but just because he works all the time, it's what was ingrained in him. Work, work, work. This is all I know. So then if he's put in a different position within our family unit, because I'm growing my self-care business, my mentorship business, and say that takes me out of the home for a coaching event or whatever it is, he doesn't know what to do, because he's like, all I know is work, and you're throwing a completely different direction at me, something I don't understand, something I don't know, that I'm not used to. So then we bicker, we fight, and there's tension.
Yeah.
Because he's not used to doing something different. He just knows work, provide for your family, work, that's just what's ingrained in him. So I told him recently, I'm like, as we're in the process of looking for a different house and things like that, I told him, I said, when this goes through, whatever it happens to be, we're taking a damn vacation, because this is flipping stressful, and I want to just go away with me and you. And like Nancy said in the beginning, Ashley's the mom that leaves her kids behind. You're freaking right, I do, because there's 6 of them here, and I need a break.
How many?
6.
You have 6 kids?
I have 7 total, but the grown one lives with his wife and our 2 grandsons in North Carolina. So, but there's 6 here at home, and we homeschool,
I know, right?
run a business and multiple businesses and all the things. So I'm very much that mom that leaves her kids at home. Peace. Goodbye.
Yeah. Right. Final question before we wrap up.
Thank you for sharing that, Ashley. That was beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, it clearly
it's
was.
ongoing.
Clearly was.
Ongoing.
Final question before we wrap up and then talk about next week. When we're talking to our kids and it's heated, are we talking to the kids or are we talking to our younger self? Because of what was ingrained in us, of how much we was being lectured. So are we lecturing ourselves, our younger self, or are we lecturing our kids?
I mean, I could talk forever, but I think that's a great question. I think it really does matter about that self-awareness. I know I was raised in a very strict household. I tend to be more strict and more structured with my son than my wife does. My wife is more of a kid, and I have to tell her, hey, can you pick up your things off the floor? Can you put that away? So those two are very similar in their actions and their behaviors. I'm one that puts things away and likes to know where they're at and likes to have things, appear like when somebody comes over, you don't have to rush around and like make it look like you don't live in chaos. I think that's something that I personally is my new growth period, is being that consciously aware that I call him 2 speeds. He's slow and stop. Me, I'm 4th gear wide open. Let's go. Let's do this. It's just my nature. It's what I do. I can multitask. I can do 17 things at once. He could do one thing at one time. And he's like, Dad, why do we have to rush all the time? Every time we rush, we always get there. And so he's providing me lessons where I have to stop and go, yeah, but no, but he's right. Like, okay, so what am I teaching him right now? I'm not teaching him that I want to do it because that's the way I do it. Okay, we have to show respect. So it's an opportunity for me to pause, not be in that reaction mode, to sit there and say, okay, here's what we got to do. You just got to learn it. Is to pause and to get on his level and say, you know what, buddy, you know how you start school at 8:05 every single morning and the teacher's there and the other students are there? That's all about respect. That's all about self-discipline. That's about responsibility. You want to be a police officer when you grow up, right? Yeah. I said, can you imagine how much discipline and how much awareness that the police officers have to have in their jobs every single day? So I have to stop and really explain things to him, get on his level, as opposed to just telling him what I want and what I expect. But yeah, I think that comes in the nature. I think my wife tends to rebel quite a bit because her parents were really structured with her. So she's like, oh, hey, I can just leave everything everywhere I want. And so I have to also have that conversation with her and say, listen, I understand that you don't think it's a big deal that our bedroom looks like a college dorm room. But however, when I walk in, and I've done some research on this, is that when I walk in, my brain gets stressed out because there's so much chaos. There's so many things out of place, and it makes my mind go poof, that I don't enjoy the moment. I sit there and I think, oh, why didn't she pick that up? Da, da, da. I'm consumed with not enjoying the moment because you feel like you really don't care. So can we strike a chord? Can we strike a balance that makes sure that there's just nothing on the floor? And if something's on the floor for a couple of days, can we put it away? Or can I just put it in a part of the closet where I don't have to see it? So when I walk in the room, I don't get triggered, because that's my emotional response. And so we have those conversations. It's not always easy. It's not always pretty. And then sometimes I just put it in a bag and I put it in the garage. And if nobody asks me about it, I get rid of it. Yeah.
Oh,
True story. True story. It works. It works.
Oh
like
my gosh. Oh,
my wife said, didn't we have a footstool once? And I'm like, did we have a footstool? It's in the garage in a bag.
Okay, so get this. My children, when mom has to go psycho, is what I say, and I have to go upstairs with garbage bags because you refuse to clean up the clothes I've asked you to clean up about 50 million times, as a mom exaggeration. Mm-hmm. If you're not going to clean them up, I don't care if it's a sock. I don't care if it's your pants. You might have no pants at the end of this, cleanup moment. But I will start shoving shit in garbage bags. And sometimes they will take garbage bags and they will help me. And I'm like, damn it, this defeats the purpose of what I'm supposed to be doing here. To take it away, to put it in the basement, never to be found again. And what do? They go and magically it reappears. And it's like, damn it, would you stay out of the spaces that I put things to take away from you? But yeah, sometimes it kicks you in the ass, the opposite effect. But no, I'm much like you of Why is this out? Why can't you put it away? I asked you nicely a few times, and now I'm mad because you haven't listened. And you're speaking my language.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, we're going to wrap up. We're going to wrap up because obviously my laptop's about to go flat. So we'll
that's a whole other show. How parents respond to their kids. There you go.
Exactly.
Oh,
Exactly.
God.
Right. Next week, we're discussing pornographic addiction.
Well, I don't have that.
Are you on it, Richard?
I'm in.
Pornographic addiction. Yeah, that could be a trigger to Ashley. So we'll see you next week. So
Thank you, Mr. Adam. Thank you guys for jamming in this conversation. I definitely learned and was reminded. So we continue, we grow and rise together. So yes,
absolutely, yeah. Let's get this shirt, guys. Let's get this shirt.